Hi, welcome to section 8.1, perimeter. We're going to continue, but this time with application of perimeter. But before we could do the application, I want to review first with equation formulas for perimeter. Now for square, I know in the previous section, I used S sub 1, S sub 2, S sub 3, and S sub 4 to represent the sides of a square. Now, if side 1, side 2, side 3, and side 4 are the same measures, which they should be for a square, then the formula for perimeter is P equal 4 times S, where S represents the measure of the side. Now, for quadrilateral, a four-sided shape, the formula for perimeter is P equals S sub 1 plus S sub 2 plus S sub 3 plus S sub 4. That's only if the sides are different measurements or different sizes. So repeat this formula if the sides are different measurements or different sizes. Now for a rectangle, and it has to be classified as a rectangle in the beginning. So if it tells you that it's a rectangle, then we can assume that side 1 or S sub 1 is equal to side 2 or S sub 2, meaning that the two sides that are opposite to each other or parallel to each other or equal to each other or congruent to each other. So repeat, the two sides are parallel or opposite to each other or equal or congruent to each other. Then we could say the same thing for side 3 and side 4. These two sides that are opposite or parallel to each other or equal to each other or congruent to each other. So we can safely assume that if it was classified as a rectangle. That's the two parts of a rectangle that we should know already if it was classified as a rectangle in the beginning. So knowing that side 1 is equal to side 2 and side 3 is equal to side 4. So instead of using side 1, side 2, side 3, and side 4, we're going to use length and width of a rectangle. So repeat, we're going to use length and width of a rectangle. We're going to use L to represent length, and we're going to use W to represent width. So as I mentioned before, side 1 is equal to side 2. So we have length here and length here. Since they're the same, we're going to put them twice for side 1 and side 2. Side 3 and side 4, which is going to represent width. So side 3 and side 4, since they're equal to each other, and we're using them to represent width, we're going to have two W's. So W here and W there. So the equation for perimeter is P equal L plus W plus W. Also, you can rewrite it where it's, for the other equation, P equals 2L plus 2W, or 2 times L plus 2 times W. So, either way, you're free to use the first equation or the second equation, whichever you like, as long as you can plug in correctly and operate correctly using order of operation. So let's go to the word problem, the application for perimeter. So in this word problem, it states Jane is constructing a rectangular shed with a perimeter of 48 feet. If the length is 3 feet less than twice the width, then what are the measurement for the length and width? So first thing is we need to identify what we know from this given word problem. So since it says rectangular shed, that rectangular gives a clue that this is the equation for perimeter, which is P equals L plus W plus W. Now, as I stated before, you're free to use the two equations that I gave you before for perimeter of a rectangle. Now, for this example, I'm going to use the first equation. So we're going to use P equals L plus W plus W. Now, the other information that we know from this given word problem is the perimeter. Perimeter is 48 feet, so here I wrote P is equal to 48 feet. Now, don't worry about the unit in terms of your work. You do need to remember to include your units in your final answer. So repeat, don't worry about having your units in your work, but you do need it to have it in your final answer. All right, the next part of the information we have that we need to use for this problem is the length is 3 feet less than twice the width. So repeat, length is 3 feet less than twice the width. Now this we had to transform into an equation. So repeat, we had to transform this into an equation. This ties into what we cover in section 1.1, translating phrases into algebraic expression. So I'm going to break it down in this sentence on transforming into an equation. So where it says length is, when it says length is, we're going to rewrite it as L equal. So repeat, where it says length is, we're going to rewrite it as L equal. Now, in this sentence, it says less than. So when it says less than, it's meaning subtract. So repeat, when it says less than, it means subtract. If it says more than, that means you're going to be adding. So here, if it says less than, you're going to subtract. If it says more than, you're going to add. Now, since it's subtracting, so 3 feet less than twice the width, that means that when it says less than, whatever comes after, in this case, twice the width, that will go first. So repeat, when it says less than, whatever comes after less than, in this case, twice the width, that will go first. So when it says twice the width, that means it's going to be 2 times the width. To represent it algebraically, it's going to be 2w. So twice the width, we rewrote it as 2w. And going back, when it says less than, that's going to be subtract. So we're going to put a minus. And then last is the 3 feet. So we're going to put 3 after the minus. So to transform length is 3 feet less than twice the width, you're going to rewrite it as L equals 2w minus 3. So again, if you have forgotten how to translate this into an algebraic expression or an equation, then go back to section 1.1, translating phrases into algebraic expression. The only difference here is we transform this into equation, but I already identified length is L equal. Alright, so I put all my information all together. So what I'm going to do is now plug in my information into the equation for perimeter. So P equals L plus W plus W. Now, the first thing that we do know is the perimeter, and the second thing we do know is what is L equal to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug 48 into P, and since we know what L is equal to, which is 2W minus 3, we're going to plug that in. So repeat, we're going to plug in 2W minus 3 into each of the L. So repeat, we're going to plug in 2W minus 3 into each of the L. So where P is the perimeter, I substituted with 48 because that's what we know. And then I substitute length, the L, with what it equals to 2W minus 3. So here is 2W minus 3 for the first L, plus from the given equation, and then 2W minus 3 for the second L, the length. And then I brought down plus W because that's what is from the equation, and that's what we didn't change or mess with. So right now what I have is 48 equals 2W minus 3 plus 2W minus 3 plus W plus W. So let me clear up this work. Alright, so here's the equation that we have after plugging in perimeter and length. Now the reason we did this is because this way now we have one variable that we can solve. Now if I go back, in the equation we have length and width. Now we don't know what they are, and it's kind of hard to solve for two variables when you only have one equation. So repeat, it's hard to solve for two variables when we have one equation. Which is why we plugged in what length is, 2W minus 3. When we plugged in, we changed L into W, in terms of W, sorry. We changed L in terms of W. So this way we can combine all the W's together, and we only have one variable, which will make it easier to solve. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to combine like terms. I'm going to combine 2W with 2W plus W, and then I'm going to combine minus 3 and minus 3 together. So when I combine like terms, I'm going to have 48 equals 6W minus 6. So again, 2W plus 2W plus W will be 6W, and then negative 3 minus 3 will be negative 6. Now it's just a regular equation that we can solve for W. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cancel out the minus 6. By canceling out, I'm going to add 6 to both sides, so that way I can balance the equation. So plus 6 on the right side and plus 6 on the left side of the equal sign. So when I add 6 to both sides, 48 plus 6 will be 54. And then minus 6 plus 6 will cancel out. And then I'm left with 6w on the right side of the equal sign. Then, what we do to solve for w, I want to divide both sides by the coefficient in front of w, which is 6. So here I'm dividing both sides by 6. So when I divide both sides by 6, on the left, 54 divided by 6, that will be 9. And then 6w divided by 6 will just be w. So here, I have 9 equals w. Now I rearrange it where now I have the variable on the left and the number on the right, so w equals 9. So don't be surprised, don't worry. If you have 9 equals w, you can flip it around and make it w equals 9. You could do that as long as you switch the sides and keep the sides intact, okay? The reason I say keep it intact is if you have one side that has multiple parts, such as x plus 9, you keep it the same. You don't switch the sign, you just keep it the same. You just flip it from left to right side and right side to left side. Now, since we know width is 9, what we're going to do is we're going to solve for length. So I'm going to move the width information and then combine it with the equation that we had for length. So I move it to the right side. So width is 9 and length is the equation that we got from earlier, 2w minus 3. So since we now know what width is, what we're going to do is we're going to plug 9 into w to solve for length. So here I switch out w, or I substitute w with 9. So now I have length equals 2 times 9 minus 3. Following the order of operation, I'm going to do 2 times 9 first, which will be 18, and then I bring down to minus 3. So now I have length equals 18 minus 3. Then I'm going to solve that. That's going to be length equals 15. So we solve for length. So we have width, which is 9, length is 15. So our final answer will be width equals 9 feet, length is equal to 15 feet. Now remember, I mentioned that you don't have to use your units in your work. However, you do need to include it in your final answer. So these are the dimensions for the rectangular shed. And that's what the question was asking. What are the measurement for length and width? Length is 15 feet and width is 9 feet. And again, make sure to include your units in your final answer. You don't have to in your work, but make sure you include it in your final answer.